I'm going to ask Steve Peters to come up, who's from the Asian Development Bank, to set the scene a bit more for green hydrogen and what ADB is looking to do in this area, and then I'll introduce the panelists after. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Peter, and thank you to UNIDO for inviting me. I'm just hoping I can get the presentation up. Okay, so while we're waiting for the presentation, I'll give you the results of the panel. The results of the panel is answer F. So there are A, B, C, D, and then there's E, which is skilling people up and creating a core of people who can operate these plants and sell these plants and take part in the ecosystem, and F is all of the above. So the F is the answer. While this is going on, could we have this presentation up, please? While this is going on, I just wanted to say that ADB has been working on hydrogen since about 2018. A colleague of ours, Toro E2, worked on a number of initiatives, including hydrogen hubs and a Friends of Hydrogen network. And then COVID came and Toro went back to Japan, and we didn't do much during COVID. And then we needed to get hydrogen inquiries supported. Sorry, I'll go back. Yeah, I've got the slides. Sorry. Can we go back to the front one? So what ended up happening was that I ended up taking over the hydrogen desk, and I'm a biogas guy. So I'm coming in from a slow start. Today actually marks the last time I will present for hydrogen for ADB. I'm handing it over to my colleague Tron and going back to my first love, which is biogas. So before we move ahead, I wanted to talk a little bit about net zero. And I think this sets the scene for all four panels, actually, sessions. Why are we doing this? What's the reason? And the underlying objective is to decarbonise. And if you look at this slide, hydrogen gets a number of mentions, right? It's a part of a pathway, but it's one of a number of pathways. So there's a lot of hype about hydrogen at the moment, and some people are very excited and some people are very sceptical. The truth lies probably somewhere in the middle, of course. So there's like 50% of SAF and those sorts of activities. So it has a huge role in this. Going back to what ADB's worked on, we've been doing work with our friends from the International Solar Alliance as a collaboration with the Green Hydrogen Innovation Centre, and our colleague Madula will come and talk on the panel on this. We've done some policy work and we've done some knowledge work, but we're a little bit behind the World Bank and IFC and some of these other organisations. But I wanted to talk about how we're seeing hydrogen deals come into us and hydrogen inquiries coming in. And they're coming in across three separate, distinct types of projects. And it's interesting that those types of projects also have distinct cost tickets. So if you look at green hydrogen as a molecule, so looking at the oil and gas size, downsizing to make hydrogen, looking at large-scale electrolyzers, large-scale renewables, and low-cost hydrogen, you know, the $3 and $4 and $5 per kilo projected. Those projects have a typical ticket size of $100 to $500 million. And we're seeing those, and no surprises, in countries like India. China, of course, is very active in these areas as well. They're the areas that we're being asked to look at. These are typically private sector transactions. What we're seeing is private sector is moving a lot faster than public sector because private sector has a much higher risk appetite. And in some countries, hydrogen's a real buzzword. So that's the big tickets. And then on the other end are the projects from $1 to $50 million, which are small scale demonstrator projects. For instance, someone using a biomass gasification system and modifying that to make ethanol or methanol, or stripping off CO2 and producing hydrogen for parasitic unique applications. And that sort of project is, we're seeing a lot of. They're not getting funded because they're too small, and the innovation side of it is getting funded from venture capital, but that actually is the weak point. But the area where we will see the most impact is in the middle. And this is using hydrogen as one of a number of pathways to reduce the emissions from hard to abate sectors such as cement, steel, fertilizer, air transport, shipping, and some industrial processes. And hydrogen is part of that solution, but only where there's not a real alternative. So I'll give you an example. You have a blast furnace. We visited a blast furnace in India last year, and we were sitting in a room with the engineering team, great bunch of people, really smart, really focused, really interested to reduce their emissions. And they said, Steve, for every tonne of cement, every tonne of steel we produce 2.3 tonnes of CO2. And I said, okay, so what's the comparison? He said, well, mini mills, which are the recycling mills, produce 300 kilos per tonne of steel. So there's, from the recycling point of view, these mini mills are a lot more productive, but they can't process raw steel. They can't process raw iron oxide. And they said, our target is to get down to 1.2 tonnes of CO2 per tonne of steel. And I said, well, how do you do that? And they then sat down and said, we want to build solar applications. We want to do parasitic use of hydrogen. We want to modify our blast furnaces. We're worried about what will happen to our blast furnaces when we do these modifications. Do you have the answer? And of course, I'm the biogas guy, so I had to say, I'm sorry, sir, I don't have the answer for that. But the good thing about working for ADB is I can find someone who does. So we went out, we came back to them. That is a massive investment. That's several $100 million worth of money. Very big factory in a very big industrial part of India. Can't only be done by private sector because it's a state-owned enterprise with not particularly good credit. So there needs to be some form of lending policy, and that's this blended financing that we hear quite a lot of, which is a mix between some private equity, some state borrowing against a sovereign guarantee, some lending to a state against results or policy, and a range of concessional monies. So the engineering of the building, of the facility, is just as important, or is more important, is the financial engineering of the particular transaction. And that level of sophistication, I think, is something that falls under, F, all of the above. We need to look at that. So we have these three sizes of transactions. They represent three different lending modalities. They represent three different types of customers. They represent three different types of supply chains. So then we go on to Liebert's hydrogen ladder. Now, I just wanted to know, has everybody seen this before? Tell me if you've ever seen this before. Okay, so let me ask another question. Who thinks hydrogen is hype? Good man, okay, but it's half is still a sort of, using fuzzy logic, that's still one. There's a very large hope and desire for hydrogen to be an answer. And it is kind of an answer, but it's part of a range of activities, and we've got to be very careful about using it. It's like assuming in a military operation that if you have an aircraft carrier, you can't be beaten. Well, maybe not. So it's that level of thinking about multifunctional, multimodal changes. So you'll see that no real alternative is fertilizer, hydrogenation, hydrocracking, desulfurization. So shipping, aviation, chemical feedstocks, and these activities have other alternatives. The question is, do you have other alternatives where you are? If you're in your country that's rich in, say, for instance, natural gas, then this is not going to be a solution. Hydrogen's not going to be a solution for you. But if you're rich in renewables, maybe. But if you don't have anything, then you're really stuck, because you're going to really be stuck to find these materials. So I think the best quote I've heard about this is from a lady who runs Hydrogen for Arup in the UK. And her comment was, hydrogen is like a sledgehammer. It's expensive, dangerous, and hard, and you only use it when you have no real alternative. And that's a direct quote from her. So if you look at where we're using hydrogen, we need hydrogen to be using the available resources close to where we're using it, or with an export market that's proven, that has people who can operate it, people who can use the materials, people who can create the downstream supply chains and logistics. It's a massive endeavour. We're talking trillions of dollars worth of investment, but it's not the only one. I'll be 10 seconds and I'll finish. So if I could just pass on one message about hydrogen. Hydrogen is one of a suite of solutions we have, and we need to apply very critical thinking to it. And we also need to recognise that getting it down to $2 a kilo means a lot of investment. That's trillions of dollars investment before we get it to $2 a kilo. So that means governments and multilateral development banks, I see some of my colleagues from the different multilats, we need to step up and be involved in it. So on that note, I'd like to thank you for your kind attention and pass it back to Peter. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot, Steve. We're now going to go on to the panel discussion. So let me just get the slides up. Oh dear, same issue as always. I mean, I can do it the manual way and read out while that's coming up. So we're joined by 5 distinguished speakers who are all experts in this field from different perspectives, which is fantastic. So I really appreciate them coming today to join the panel discussion. So firstly, if the speakers can all come up as I read your name. But firstly, Quinn Tio, would you mind coming up to the stage? Who's a consultant at USAID. Midjula Boadaj, I'm going to get that right. Give me 3 or 4 times to practice. Petra Christie, who's a senior analyst at Climate Work Centre. Joseph Cordonnier, who's an industry analyst at OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And then finally, Abhas Singer, who's a project manager at Still Zero Climate Group. And sorry, Midjula, I didn't actually say where you're from. So Midjula is a capacity building specialist at the International Solar Alliance. So we have the whole panel there. So we're going to move on to the first questions. So we have a round of prepared questions first, and each speaker will talk a bit more about their organizations and what they're doing in the space of green hydrogen. We have about 5 minutes each, and please adhere to the timer where possible. And then we're going to open it up to audience Q&A, and as I said, we have a roving mic. There might also be an option to post questions through the app, but I'm looking at the people at the back, and I'm not getting any response. So, okay, we're going to do it just through the middle. Okay, so I'm just going to move over here and we're going to do the first question. Great, so thank you all for joining. So do you mind briefly introducing yourself and your organization and how that's contributing to the development of green hydrogen in the Asia Pacific region? So maybe we start with Quinn and we go along the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor to be here today to join with a very important section of green hydrogen. Is a new section. My name is Quỳnh Thúy Ngô. I'm consultant of the Philip from USAID Philip 2 program, and I have experience for more than 20 years in private and public sector with 13 years work with the Ministry of Industry and Trade of Vietnam and as a department leader of the ministry where I developed the national energy strategies and master plan on the energy and regulator for the energy sector. From last year, I moved to the private sector as a consultant to continue contribute my experience in the energy sector. Thank you very much. And for the sorry for the Village 2 program, I would like to say something about the organization. The USAID Vietnam Low Emission Energy Program 2 is a program to help the ministry in the energy sector to and that's the primary goal of Philip 2 is to advance the transition of Vietnam to clean, secure, and market-based energy sector by increasing the deployment and advanced energy system, improving energy sector performance, and increasing competition in energy sector. So it's really important program that help us to conduct the new hydrogen strategy of Vietnam. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Quinn, and I'm sure we've got a lot of questions for you in the audience Q&A. Madhula?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ridula Bharadwaj. Thank you, UNIDO and ADB, for inviting me to this panel. I'm capacity building specialist in International Solar Alliance and also leading the ISA programs on green hydrogen storage and solar e-mobility. So in terms of activities of International Solar Alliance, I'll give you a brief summary of how ISA is doing, is initiating this program. Now this program, ISA has 9 programs total, and the latest one, the 9th one, is green hydrogen, which started roughly 2.5 years back. So what we did was, as you know, ISA has around 119 member countries across all the geographies. So we have different kind of regions, countries, and they have different needs, they have different targets, they have different mandates. So we have to work with all of them. And then obviously, it's not one solution which works for all. So we have different approaches. When we talk about regions, we have Africa region, and we have the Asia Pacific. The third is the Europe, and others means US. And the fourth one is Latin America and Caribbean. So these are the 4 regions of ISA, and we work across them. Now we started doing, what we did initially when we started this program is we developed a framework for our member countries to kind of do their initial assessment of how ready they are in terms of green hydrogen uptake or production or deployment or trade. So that was our first exercise, and we launched that report in COP Sharm el-Sheikh 2 years back, and the report is on our website. The second step, what we did was we started doing deep dives of the countries which looked probables. As you know, ISA is a member-driven platform, so our main focus is to do all this, and then later on do the project pipeline identification so that actual things happen on the ground. So we did deep dive then. We did it for India, Chile, Brazil. We did that in collaboration with ISA, ADB, and NIDO, and we launched that report last year in our assembly, and that's on our website. Here we did the entire green hydrogen value chain mapping of these 3 countries, and then also worked on analyze the different kind of electrolyzers and the advancements in the electrolyzer community sector. And the third thing that I wanted to highlight is create a center of excellence. And this we did, ISA and ADB together with the G20 presidency last year, with the 2023 India presidency. And this was launched at the G20 summit. Now this platform has now become overall our program, you can say a lifeline, because whatever we do in ISA program 9, which is green hydrogen, solar for green hydrogen program, it gets integrated with this platform. And this platform is actually for capacity building. So as I speak, we have already identified a startup search partner, and we will be starting a green hydrogen startup incubation platform under this GHIC Center of Excellence. We did that for solar last year, and we identified 20 solar startups in Africa, and we launched in the G20 last year. The similar thing we are now beginning to do with green hydrogen to incentivize and give some kind of initial support, feed the seed grant, and also accelerator support to the green hydrogen startups. And the second thing that we're doing here is in the capacity building is do a very detailed, certified training workshops. We will be doing for Asia Pacific this year in September, and that's mainly focused on the policymakers. We'll be inviting 10 of our ISA Asia Pacific members and 10 to 11 Indian state officials who have announced this, the state governments which have announced their hydrogen roadmap. And then we will be doing for Africa in August, where we'll be inviting 9 or 10 Africa members, and we will be basically training the policymakers on regulations, standards, guarantee of origin kind of aspects, and very specifically on financing green hydrogen program. And the third thing that this portal or center of excellence does, and this is my last point, is to do an initial mapping. So as I speak, we have completed around 45 country insights of green hydrogen value chain analysis for 45 member countries, and it's on our website. The GHIC portal is listed, is up and running for the last 1 year. And we want collaborations, feedback, and all kind of support. And anybody, any organization or any country which is willing to join this platform is most welcome. And the last thing, sorry, I'm a bit longer. So we have a STAR-C program in ISA. STAR-C is Solar Technology Application and Resource Center. This is a very important initiative of ISA. Here we are building a capacity building center within the member countries. We have finished making for Somalia. We finished, this is operational now, it is operational in Ethiopia. And as I speak, we are about to launch the STAR-C Center in Bangladesh this week. And then in Asia Pacific, we have Vanuatu and also Fiji and Kiribati to be operational within next few months. And these centers are basically an interface between the member country and the outside world. They'll be testing, they'll be doing standards, they'll be supporting the local government, and also most importantly, they will be doing training sessions for solar and applications like solar generated hydrogen. So that's all from my side.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Majula. Actually, I just have a quick clarification question, if that's okay. Just you mentioned at the beginning about deep dive countries, and you've done 3. Are there plans to expand that into
energy transition with the very specific target as when up to the 2030 we deploy and apply the advanced technology for the green hydrogen production in Vietnam, and we also deploy advanced technology in the carbon capture associated with the process of produce hydrogen energy from the other energy like refinery or fertilizers, and we strive for the hydrogen production capacity from the use of renewable energy and other process of the carbon capture to reach about 100 and to 500 tons by 2030. And for vision to the 2050, we maximize the renewable energy to produce hydrogen up to the, 10 to 12, 20 million tons per year, and we intend to occupy around 10% of final energy of Vietnam. It's very ambitious targets and focus on renewable energy with many solution for the policies and mechanism that is the develop and supply regulation on the renewable energy development policies, and create the mechanism and legal framework for the conversion of from fossil fuel energy production to the use actively convert to hydrogen and energy, and for investment and finance proactive research and scale up the investment from pilot projects to large-scale green hydrogen energy production projects in areas with the renewable potential and near consumer, and we consider to export to the abroad if we can get the commercial projects and diversify the capital investment source, attract the capital source from the green credit, climate credit, and green bond, and domestically and internationally, and diversify the investment mechanism to develop the hydrogen-based energy project. In parallel, for the science and technology, we need to strengthen R&D application and transfer of the hydro device energy production technology and fuel conversion technology from the thermal power plant to biomass, fuel, ammonia, or hydrogen. And promote innovation activity in the field of hydro-based energy, and for the training HR development as well. So there are many policies that we set up to get the targets for the green hydrogen. I think that is a commitment from the government to get the net zero by 2050. So even it's very challenging, but it's our determined to get the target. So it's contribute to the green hydrogen. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's an ambitious and exciting new development strategy. And I had a follow-up question on what you said about the diversifying capital investment sources like through green bonds. However, I will hold that back because I want to make sure the audience has time for questions. So if we have time at the end, I may come back to that, and if we don't, then it's my loss. So can we move on to Joseph? So this mic went up. There we go. You think you can hear me? Yep. So we've talked about India and Vietnam. Now I want to move on to other countries in the region. So in particular, you've done some work on Thailand and Indonesia through the OECD's framework for industries net zero transition. Picking up on the financial element and financial solutions from your work, I know that you've looked at steel, chemicals, and textiles industries in particular. Do you want to elaborate a bit more about some of those financial solutions in those sectors?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Maybe before answering directly on the financing instruments, I will just make a couple of considerations, also echoing Steve's introduction. First, hydrogen has a potential to decarbonize many sectors. That being said, when we work with governments, notably in Southeast Asia, we also try to prioritize. So for instance, in the textile sector that you mentioned, we work with the Indonesian governments, but as this is mostly low or medium heat temperature, there are alternatives that are probably more efficient than hydrogen. So that's the first thing to prioritize the sectors. Second, hydrogen or renewable hydrogen is only economically viable in very few locations around the globe, or in very specific niche markets. And that poses an extremely tough challenge, especially in the industry sectors where you have global value chain, global competition, goods are traded globally. So even at country level, you have to consider as well the trade aspects and international markets. And a consequence of that is that we see very few investments for renewable hydrogen projects in the industry sector, with what we estimate being 10 to 40 billion annual gap in financial support. So just to close the economic viability gap in emerging markets. And only 5% of the announced projects have actually reached final investment decisions, basically. So now what are the solutions? So first, seeing that the first solutions that emerge naturally are grants and subsidies to say if there is a gap economically, we should just bridge it. And we see some examples of that, not in Indonesia and Thailand, but in other countries. For instance, Japan has no contract for different scheme supporting hydrogen and ammonia. India, also through its national hydrogen mission, has launched also, I would say, time-bound support to projects, not only for electrolysis projects, but also for electrolyzer manufacturing, so really addressing the entire value chain. But these solutions are not easily implementable in every country. And in Indonesia, for instance, we should not have things that come at cost for the government or increase the fiscal pressure. So then another solution on the financing side would be low-cost financing, blended finance. For one key reasons for hydrogen, it's very capex intensive. So if you address the cost of capital and cost of finance, you actually have a very significant impact on the levelized cost of hydrogen. And another reason for that is that you would optimize the use of public resources in order to mobilize more private finance. Again, this is possible, but we don't see that coming, at least not at the scale that we hope it would be used. So lessons from Thailand and Indonesia is maybe before the financing aspect, let's focus on enabling conditions. So setting strategy, issuing, for instance, Indonesia issued a national hydrogen roadmap a few months ago, and also on de-risking instruments. And here also a couple of examples. So first on economic instruments, Indonesia has launched its carbon market end of last year. So this is currently very small volumes, very limited scope. It's not yet covering the industry sector, but that's one step that can be done in order to price environmental costs and value also the environmental benefits of low carbon solutions. In their strategy, they also mention a few instruments, taking examples of the US and Australia on tax credits, as well as on accelerated depreciations of projects. So all these are measures that would come at lower cost for the government. And on the side of de-risking instruments, what we are doing now, this is actually a work we are doing this year with the World Bank, is based on the investor survey we did last year on the priority risk. We try to map some de-risking instruments with those priority risks. And maybe I know I don't have much time to elaborate, but just mentioning a few examples. For instance, to address offtake risks on volume and price, you can have credit enhancements through guarantees, partial guarantees, full guarantees. To address country risk, the World Bank, through MIGA, has, for instance, implemented political risk insurance that can help in turn lower the cost of capital. And another type of risk, if we take the example of the steel sector, very often you would have your costs in the domestic currency or local currency, but you would have your sales internationally, especially if you sell green steel, and therefore we would also have a risk on the foreign exchange, so currency risk. And here you may have forex credit lines for long-term hedges in order to make sure that when you do an investment in a an asset that has a lifetime of 20 years, you don't add to it the currency risk over those 20 years. So just to summarize, we have all these analyses from country experiences. We also do that through our regular work streams, work with World Bank, contributions to Breakthrough Agenda, etc. And we collect all those in case studies of available financing and de-risking instruments, which we share in our report. So very happy to disseminate those this year.
Great, thanks very much. Very comprehensive answer, and partly answers the question I had for Petra, because I wanted to make a nice link to Petra's work on Indonesia and to talk about the private sector. You've partially now answered that question, but I think you also focused on the enabling environment, doing that first before thinking about the investment. But you've also talked about really important instruments, guarantees, and how we use insurance for political risk, etc. So maybe, Petra, do you want to expand upon that private sector bit? What's really getting them to invest? And we've heard about the importance of the enabling environment and the role of the government, but do you want to expand upon any of those points?
Thank you. And yeah, it's a very nice segue. And while we have seen that Indonesia has obviously started their national hydrogen strategies earlier this year, and I think during that release of strategy, Indonesia finally see that hydrogen is one of the key factor in deploying renewable energy. And from the private sector point of view, they see quite a lot of potential in terms of the fact that Indonesia is strategically positioned around high demand market for hydrogen export, especially to Singapore, Japan, and South Korea. And in response to that, a number of project developers from the UAE and also Europe has also started to their feasibility studies. So a number of green hydrogen projects in Indonesia is still under R&D and piloting level. And some state-owned enterprises has also tried to have a better commitment in transitioning their carbon-intensive use of hydrogen, especially in ammonia and fertilizer at this point. They want to leverage the fact that as Indonesia is one of the third largest exporter for ammonia, they want to explore that market, and they want to see that leverage the global presence in that part. And we also see that a lot of the green hydrogen developers, especially that just started their feasibility studies, they have the increasing interest on developing an on-site hydrogen production, which is add more additionality than what the government of Indonesia has started through the solar power and also renewable energy certificate. And this is actually quite a good news, and it's reduced. I think reduced the concern about environmental impact and credibility while having developing an on-site green hydrogen, and a lot of them have find out also that because Indonesia has an ample amount of geothermal energy that exceed around 25% of their announced capacity, they want to explore geothermal as one of the energy source to produce green hydrogen. And this has been also responded quite positively by a number of global electrolyzers as well that want to explore the market. Though at this point, we're still waiting for a more concrete commitment from them.
Great, thanks very much. And yeah, very interesting to hear about the geothermal angle as well. I know in the Innovation Hub there's some new work that ADB is looking at on geothermal innovation, so maybe there's a crossover there. So my final question, Majula. So we want to take, I want to step back and take a bit of a bigger picture view before we then go to audience Q&A. So much broader question, what do you see as the greatest potential in hard-to-abate sectors for green hydrogen in terms of scaling green hydrogen, thinking about the roadmap that ISA has produced and some of the great work that's sort of outlined there, and what are the sort of enabling factors that underlie that?
Yes, so I'll go back to the mapping that we have done in our Green Hydrogen Innovation Center the Center of Excellence portal that I talked about last few minutes back. So based on our initial mapping of our member countries, uh, s- s- I'll just stick to Asia Pacific, although we've done it for across geography. Australia, India, Japan, and South Korea are amongst the front runners for different reasons. In terms of demand of green hydrogen, South Korea and Japan, and then of course demand and production both side India, and then Australia is emerging as a big potential exporter of green hydrogen and green ammonia, specifically to Japan, South Korea, and Singapore. So most of these are ISA member countries, so we ended up mapping the green hydrogen value chain. In terms of other countries in South Asia, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, as I mentioned, we are finishing the deep dive. Thailand, Indonesia, these four have plans to develop, they've stated in their government announcements as GH ecosystem developers. Then specifically in terms of sectors that you asked, steel refineries as expected, fertilizers, transportation, city gas are amongst the front runners which are kicking off demand. India, as you know, 80% of the hydrogen demand comes from fertilizers and refineries. So that's a ready market for taking some of the green hydrogen immediately. A few things that we have mapped, I just wanted to quickly run through, is major electrolyzer manufacturers across geographies. In terms of Siemens Energy, for instance, they provide both PEM and alkaline. Then Cummins, US, primarily known for PEM fuel cells, but also exploring PEM electrolyzers. In terms of major demand centers and countries for electrolyzer, I would say China, Japan, India, Saudi Arabia, Australia are at the front runners. And when we talk about electrolyzer, we also have to see what the countries have stated in terms of their indigenization of electrolyzers. And as you know, PEM electrolyzer uses scarce materials and rare materials. So we have done a little bit of mapping of where these raw materials are found. And so in that one, raw materials for PEM, nickel, titanium, palladium, platinum, and iridium are the main components which are expensive. So in terms of nickel, Indonesia and Philippines are front runners for the supply chain point of view. Titanium, China and Japan, and of course palladium, platinum, iridium, a lot of countries like Russia and beyond Asia Pacific. So these are the things, and one thing I wanted to highlight is that this is a new sector. So this is the electrolyzer sector specifically is giving a lot of directions to R&D in the academic sector. So for instance, there is a very well-known methodology called combinatorial material science, which uses quantum mechanics and the AI and machine learning techniques and finds substitute materials. So when you see the rare materials there is a need to find earth-abundant, cheaper materials without compromising on the performance. And that happened very successfully in the permanent magnet, which goes into the electric motors and wind turbines. And similarly here, a lot of R&D directions are being provided. So this is a very good funding opportunity for these kind of academic initiatives that are happening across the globe. So those are the main, what we've found from the GHIC country insights that we have prepared. But this is ongoing work, and we'll have more detail in our reports later this year.
Thank you very much. And yeah, very much looking forward to following the reports when they come out as well. So now we have a chance to open up for audience Q&A. So we have, about 15 minutes or so for questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please put your hand up, and the mics are here, so feel free to stand by them and say your question. Yes, if you stand and go to the mic, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Even if we use 3.8 cents per kilowatt hour, as mentioned this morning by Senior Secretary of Bangladesh Energy something, that alone, electricity alone accounts for $2 already. So when the whole world is talking about $2 hydrogen, and bear in mind, After conversion back into electricity, $2 hydrogen translates to roughly 10 cents, 10 US cents per kilowatt hour, which is already a lot cheaper than what you will get from diesel. So on that note, what is a reasonable levelized cost of hydrogen? So yeah, you get it, produce it anywhere that you have. Well, Indonesia is slightly different, or even Philippines where you have geothermal. But for a lot of the solar plants, solar farms, they don't really have water there. So how can you do power to X and use water as the hydrogen source when they don't have water? And and then account for all the transportation, capex, opex, insurance costs of delivering the hydrogen from where it's made to where it's being used. So yeah, that's the question of what's a reasonable levelized cost of hydrogen. Because right now, $2 hydrogen, that is, as Professor Daniel Kahneman says, it's a route to everyone. Because when the world propaganda says it's $2, if you're a lot more than $2, they say it's too expensive, and that's the end of the conversation. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that great question. I'm going to ask Joseph and Nabhas actually to have a go at that question. Joseph, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. Maybe I will answer two ways. The level of $2 per kilo of hydrogen, which translates into 2 cents per kilowatt hour, more or less, is also based on the current market and gray hydrogen and alternatives. You start pricing carbon, for instance, you may have a different benchmark, and of course the consequence would be many products, manufactured goods, could be at a higher price. The question is more, what's the socioeconomic consequence of this? So that's a first question. If you price carbon, if you price externality, maybe this $2 per kilo benchmark could be revised. On the other side, if you stick to it and you say you don't want to change the current cost structure or cost benchmarks of industrial goods produced through hydrogen, the main impact can also be reshuffling the value chains of industry, and this is what we see, for instance, currently in Northern Europe, where they have the chance to have good iron ore quality, surplus of renewable power that is on top stable because it's hydropower and comes at a relatively cheap price. And they are currently building a brand new steel plants, which is probably the first time over the last decades that Europe is building such a big steel plants. So I don't know if that answers fully the question, but the first one is if you price externalities, the benchmark could change, and the other ones could be based on everything that you explained. If you really want to achieve this target, maybe you would have reshuffling of where you produce hydrogen, where you produce industrial goods, and this may reshuffle as well a lot the global value chains.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have much to add to what Joseph just said, at least not for the first part. I think for the second part of your question, yeah, it's definitely one of the most important considerations, the logistics, how the logistics work out, that will determine the eventual cost of hydrogen or green hydrogen. One of the things that has been proposed, again, in the roadmap by the Indian government is setting up of clusters. As Mridula also said, the largest demand for hydrogen in India currently comes from fertilizers and oil refineries. So there's a plan to set up clusters in the vicinity of those hubs, like hubs in the vicinity of those factories where this activity happens, and use those as the sites for pilot projects instead of doing it in a different place. So that does to some extent address the logistical concern. Also, to the point that you made about availability of water, I think that this is absolutely true, and this does speak to a larger point of whenever hydrogen or green hydrogen does become commercially available or is being able to be produced at a commercial scale. I don't think every country will be able to produce it to the same degree. I mean, it will be eventually a globally traded commodity. It will have to be. Some countries that are more naturally and geographically and topographically gifted in terms of availability of water, availability of sun, etc., wind, they will be at an advantage. Other countries which do not have that kind of capacity, they will have to rely on imports. So so yeah, I mean, I guess that kinds of touches upon what you had. I mean, not every country will be starting from the same position. So that tradability needs to be there.
Thank you both, and I hope that answers partially the question. You're given an awkward nod there, so I'm taking it as partially answered. Not an easy one to answer. Other questions from the audience? Yes, do you want to come to the mic just there? Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Mickey from the Climate Bonds Initiative, and we've set out our standards for hydrogen to certify green bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, and social and SNS bonds for hydrogen at the entity, project, and project, entity, and use of proceeds level. So aside from certification from entities like climate bonds, what are the other signals or activities that could encourage investments into hydrogen production here in Asia? Thank you.
Who would like to take that question? I'm looking towards that side of the panel. Any takers? Petra, you want to give it a go?
Yeah, I think hopefully I can answer this partially. But in terms of standard, there's still, especially for Indonesia, we still want to ensure that any kind of standard to leverage the demand of green hydrogen production also applicable both for the government and also the private sectors. At this point, we want to make sure any kind of green hydrogen application is able to encourage private sector to implement it, that it will help their emission reduction goals as well and strategies. And for the government, it would enable them to be able to monitor and evaluate the progress of the utilization of green hydrogen. And at this point, we, especially where countries are still starting to implement, try to get their head around green hydrogen, the standard of the standard for, especially for the corporation, needs to be able to also align with their cost-sensitive situation, given that a number of companies that want to implement green hydrogen would have to consider the additional cost of capital when they want to transition at this point. Yeah, hopefully that.
I just want to add
course,
to
yeah.
that one. Yeah, about the standards that you mentioned. I think the wise thing will be, and most of the governments are probably thinking about it already, including India, that to make the standards as international as possible, where we have a broader convergence. And the reason is, for instance, you have CBAM for anything entering into Europe. So if you have to meet that criteria, then it's better to have standards which meet that international protocol. So I think Indian government in many forums have already stated that they are going to have a very stringent standards which passes the international things. So I think that's one of the things, because many countries have green steel threshold here already announced. So if you want to export to those countries for steel making, then the guarantee of origin, the standards, all those things will play a major role in getting the contracts.
Thank you. And we have a couple of questions that were submitted through the app. And actually, one of them gives me a nice segue to ask the question that I was going to ask Quinn before, because I've got a very similar question that's come in through the app. So as you mentioned about diversifying sources. You talked about green bonds briefly as part of Vietnam's approach. We've had a question that's looking at very specific type of investor, commercial banks. And as part of diversification, I know that's more from the government perspective with the bonds, but is there anything you want to say about the role of commercial banks in Vietnam and its energy strategy?
Thank you for your question. I think for the implementation of the strategy, we need the finance arrangement, and from the government policies, we encourage all the partner, all the component of the country to develop the hydrogen project, and from the private sector, we need the cooperation from the international organization as well, and for the commercial bank, of course, from the international and most domestic, we need their support on this. So for the scheme of each project, it should be the mechanism and policies. When we manage and regulator of the project, it should be some proposal from the developer to the government, and then we consider what is the harmonization between the government, the developer, and the user for regulate the policy in the future. So it's a quite early step in Vietnam. So now we just set up some mechanism, and we need cooperation with international like USAID or other organization, and follow the international scheme. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'd love to ask that same question for other countries you've spoken about today, but just because of time, and we're coming to the end of this session, I'd like to move to a final question, and please do keep the answers as short as possible. This also does link to a question, another question we had in the app, so I'm trying to merge the two together. So if you had to choose, so the question is from the technology perspective. We talked about the finance perspective. This is a question that, of course, it's all of the above, like Steve was saying before. It's obviously going to be the answer. But if you had to choose one technology that you think would make a difference in the country that you're particularly speaking about in the hydrogen space, what would it be? So should we start at the end again, Quinn, and come along here? And you can speak about any country you wish if you were speaking about a regional approach.
So for me, from Vietnam, we consider about the technology because the technologies that we can get the commercial project, and then we set up, we follow with some policy and the standards, but based on the technology, the advance. Yes, so we should follow, and we adjust our strategy to adapt with the new technology. Yeah.
So you're asking, Peter, about what technologies to
Yes.
be preferred?
Yeah, so it's a question where the obvious answer is all of the above, but I think if you had to choose one technology, I think the question we've had is what would it be, particularly in the context of a country that you can choose for the region?
In green hydrogen space, so I'll stick to the production side because that's where the generators and the electrolyzers, they come into picture. So as I'll talk about the generator first. Now, it's important in terms of the cost of production of green hydrogen, to keep in mind the utilization of electrolyzers. So with that thing in mind, solar alone, although our program is called Solar for Hydrogen, but solar alone will not give you good capacity utilization factor for the electrolyzer. So you need to think about the technologies related to renewables, which one to club with solar, so that in the end you have a cost, which is viable for commercialization. So with that thing in mind, yes, the appropriate or optimization of mix of renewable generators is very important. And in terms of electrolyzer, as we know, PEM electrolyzer is very compatible with the fluctuations or intermittency of RE. It has that inherent pro as compared to the alkaline. But as I said sometimes back, that it uses rare materials and scarce materials, which supply chain becomes an issue if you want to talk about indigenization of electrolyzer. So we have to think about the country-specific solution. The countries which want to indigenize, for instance, PEM electrolyzer, then like it happened in the metal hydride or lithium battery scenario, where like if you think about India, they have a huge gigafactory plan for lithium batteries, but we don't have nickel, we don't have cobalt, we don't have lithium, of course. So they switched to, I think the majority of the effort is going to be, as I know, as I understand, is on the LFP version, which doesn't use nickel, doesn't use cobalt.
So Imogen, I'm going to have to cut you off there just because of time. Just a quick technology from the panel, but electrolyzers.
So electrolyzer is, again, as I said, alkaline is cheaper, and then it's not very huge difference in performance now, looking at the latest electrolyte.
Petra.
Yeah, I was actually going to say electrolyzer as well, but with Indonesia, electrolyzer powered by on-grid supply of renewable energies, especially through geothermal at this point. Yeah.
I would have answered exactly the same way. So renewable energy with high capacity factor and electrolyzers with lower impact on critical minerals. These are also the two factors that are impacting the most, but maybe to provide something different on the industry side, so end use side, I think especially for the steel sector, the direct reduction will have a key impact, either for high-grade iron ore or also some alternative submerged arc furnaces that can also valorize lower-grade iron ore.
I'm in the very lucky position that Mridula and I are from the same country, and she's already spoken before me, so everything that she said and the others.
Great, thank you. That was a trick question, really, that one to finish. So in the last few minutes, we'll just do a quick wrap up, and I'd like to ask my colleague, Yi Zhang, if she's here, if you want to do a couple of minutes of the key takeaways. I know it's quite a big job to do, but key takeaways from the session, and then we'll finish with a quick QR code we've got on there.
Yes, thank you, Peter. So got this honor to be here. I'm the coordinator for the A2D facility. Peter introduced early in this session for the Accelerate to Demonstrate facility program in UNIDO. I'm the coordinator for smart energy and industry decarbonization. So actually, it's kind of fit with my area because the industry decarbonization and the heavy industry sectors have a really close relation with green hydrogen. And I just want to thank first for Annika because she started like the first session for Thematic track 4, which is very exciting with a topic on green hydrogen. And then to Steve, because it's interesting thing, and also I'm an engineer, and they're talking about how to do financing engineering across in the sectors in hydrogen, and also about the hydrogen lenders, which is also actually I never heard about this before. It's a good time for me to learn from that. And the work on ADB doing, and also thanks Peter for this starting the settings for the session and moderating all the panels. And it would be very interesting, like Quinn and also Petra talking about the local enabling environment, as it's quite important for as you have already basic setting for local environment. How do you giving the environment to fight for green hydrogen to grow? And then for the international context, I would thank Madura to see how solar for green hydrogen to like mapping out in countries you mentioned, especially developing countries, in this sense. And also for Joseph on how you really do finance and find the gaps. To also it's a response to Steve's thinking about financing part for the engineering. Sorry, I mentioned you again. And then it's really important to find the problem and then we find the solution. So it's always like we are not trying to find like make it like supply based, but more like needs driven based to like target solving problems instead of selling products, especially in these high tech areas. And then also I want to thank Apas for your presentation, like also the very practical elaborations on how like Steel Little to do work on this specific projects and how to solve the real problems. I think it's already long, so I want to pass it by to Peter for the final. You have a
great. No, thanks a lot, E. And yeah, just to quickly wrap up, it's obviously the start of the conversation. You can't have 1.5 hour sessions and solve all the green hydrogen issues. This is just a chance for everyone to learn about what's been happening in different countries, what are the new strategies, what are the new finance instruments that are coming out, case studies, lessons learned. This is really what this session's about, and really to start the conversation, and hopefully it leads to new partnerships and collaborations. We did have a final slide, but it doesn't seem to be here. So let me just let's see if it actually comes up. Yeah, just to finish, as I have 15 seconds on the clock left. So we have the energy efficiency renewable sector in the industrial sector session straight after the coffee break. So please come back for that, where we'll talk about a different set of technologies for the industry. And then we've got CCUS on Thursday and digital solutions as well. So we're taking very much a thematic approach to this thematic track, looking at different solutions. And we have a feedback form on there, which is a QR code. It takes literally like 10 seconds to do. It's just a couple of quick multiple choice questions. It's very helpful for us to understand, what organizations you're from and countries and regions and what you think about the session. So with that, I just want to thank all of our panelists, and thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences, particularly from your countries as well. So give a round of applause and thank you everyone.